comfortable. So,
Yes, I'll
hey,
follow your guidance here. You're the expert.
oh, well, I appreciate the vote of confidence. Um, Thank you for joining me. You're in Hong Kong, correct?
Correct.
Okay, how long have you been there?
I've been here for 16 years.
Wow, 16. Have you adopted it as your home yet, or is it still your home
Oh
away from
yeah,
home?
no, I'm totally home. And also for context, before Hong Kong, I was living in China, and before China, Taiwan. So I've been in this part of the world for 20 years now.
20 years. Oh, congratulations. Do you ever fly back over to Europe, or I think you were also in Russia at some point, or maybe you just speak Russian?
Not Russia, but I grew up in many different countries because of my family. So I'm used to living. So I grew up in Brazil, in France, in the Netherlands. My husband is Australian. I was in Australia last year, so I'm pretty international. So I'm happy being here and being open to other places as well.
Awesome. Yeah, traveling is a beautiful thing to do, especially if you find a place that you can make your home, but you still are blessed enough to be able to take the occasional trip. Um, your work has been you work in diversity and inclusion. Is that
Yes.
something that
So
you've always been passionate about? Is it something that you've always done, or did you kind of transition into that later in life?
Yeah, so I transitioned into that. So my career had always been more traditional in the corporate world of business development and sales. I spent 7 years at Apple. I also worked for another big company, Estee Lauder. I did some business development for European companies in China. But what happened is, as I was doing business development, I realized that it's really about the people. And I started to develop a passion for leading people, but more so developing people, helping people grow, really unlock their potential. And I realized that a big part of that is really diversity. A lot of people, they are trying to mask and be someone else because that's what society wants us to be. For example, we are conditioned to become an extrovert if you want to be a public speaker, or to have like a very strong A personality. And so a lot of people I notice tend to put themselves into someone else's shoes and play a role that they're not really, rather than embracing who they really are. And the magic is when you actually embrace who you are, that's when you really can add value, because there's only one of you in 8 billion. And personally for me, that's what I discovered. My personal growth is when I really embraced that I have an accent, when I embrace that I'm an introvert, when I embrace that I'm not the strongest voice in the room. That's really when I started to shine, because I was really embracing who I really am. And that's what I try to do in my work today in diversity, equity, and inclusion, is trying to create these inclusive spaces where people can shine because we embrace who they truly are, rather than trying to make them fit inside a mold.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can relate to that, especially I've never been comfortable public speaking and things like this, but sometimes people get put into positions, sometimes unexpectedly, so they kind of exaggerate what they believe they should be doing instead of what um, they know themselves to be. So that can really turn out poorly in some occasions. So I think that's important work that you're doing to help people find their own voices and be comfortable and confident. Um, and is that something that I know you do a lot of public speaking. Um, does that consume most of your time, or is it mostly focused on writing at this point?
So I have three pillars for everyone to understand a little bit what I do. And so one of these pillars is public speaking, where I go in conferences or summits, for example, and it's more keynote presentation, and where it's typically me on stage or on a panel presenting. So that's one part. The second part is more corporate training. For example, companies want to have someone talk to them about feedback, and have a workshop around communication and open feedback and how to provide feedback. So I develop a lot of customized content for corporates that want to typically build inclusive, high-performing teams. So that's the second part. And the third one is writing. As you know, and that's how we met actually, I do a lot of writing across so many platforms. I write a lot on Medium, where I do like longer articles, but I also do daily posts on LinkedIn. Recently, I started on X as well, which is where we connected as well. And besides this writing, that is more my daily writing, I do books. So we talked about, we're going to talk about self-publishing. So this is my first book, The Lemon Tree Mindset. I've published 2 books. I'm about to publish a third one, which is more a digital guide on self-publishing. So that's why I was very excited to talk about that topic today. I also just finished my memoir, which took me a year to write. And it's about my life living in 9 different countries, which is really exciting to put that into a book. So to answer your question, what takes time? Everything is an ecosystem. So I can't really separate things, because my writing actually helps me prepare my content for my keynotes and for my workshops, and my workshops also give me ideas to develop content. So I would say that my entire day is around this ecosystem of moving pieces.
I have to say that's really impressive. Speaking for myself and a lot of other people that write, I know that organization is a very difficult thing for most writers. Myself, I kind of typically just go with the flow of the day, and it can take years to finish a product. So I imagine that you have a lot to offer. I mean, so by that count, you published The Lemon Tree in January, right? Then your
Yeah,
second book in April, and
yes.
now, I mean, that's incredible. Congratulations. Um,
Thank
so
you.
and the so you went a whole career without publishing, then you were able to publish a book and actually get it on a bestsellers list. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, also to clarify, because I want to be very, very transparent. When we're saying bestseller, like you can look at it from many different angles. So
Yeah,
in my case, when I talk about bestseller, so I self-publish on Amazon.
yeah.
And the way to become a bestseller, because I also talked about it in the guide, in the self-publishing guide, is you really have to be very strategic on where you're actually going to put your book, because you have so many digital shelves, which are categories. And so Amazon allows you to put your book in up to 3 categories, and you must use the 3 categories, because otherwise you become invisible. And so in one of the 3 categories, which is journaling, the best that it ranked, and that was a couple of weeks ago, it was top 18. So it started to go down. It was like 58, and then it went to 31, and then it went down to 18. So that's what I mean by bestseller. It's not the New York bestseller.
Oh,
Maybe one
no,
day.
no, no. Yeah, maybe one day.
But
But
still, it's an amazing accomplishment, and I think anyone listening to this can also get the inspiration that you can do it. It's doable. I only started writing when I was 41, and I was able to achieve this in a few months with a lot of strategy, with a lot of tactics, but also with the mindset.
yeah, I mean, I imagine even people that go through traditional publishing would be jealous of being number 19, 18 in journaling. So don't shy away from that accomplishment. That's really great. Um, did you have any roadblocks? Because I mean, that's so fast to go from never publishing to self-publishing to going to number 18. Um, and you described kind of your organization as an ecosystem, right? So
So if I had roadblocks,
yes.
so I didn't. And the reason why I didn't is because I think when you're an underdog and when you do something for the first time, you have no expectations. So for me, everything was like, okay, first I published the book as an ebook. And then some people said, hey, I would love to read your ebook, but I'm more of a manual book, like a traditional book type of person. So then I published it on paper. And slowly it was like I was starting to create these building blocks, one on top of the next. So then I started to really promote the book in a way where I was really saying who this book is for. And I was saying, look, this is my reinvention. These are the 19 lessons that helped me be unemployed, go from being unemployed to now being a public speaker and writing and having the confidence to go on stage and to work with top Fortune 500. So if I've done it, you can do it. And this is the book that I use. So it's very easy for me to feel comfortable talking about something that helped me, because I have the absolute conviction that if you want to reinvent yourself, you can. And that's why, back to your question, I did not have these roadblocks, because I had the mindset of saying, I know that this can help people. I just have to find ways to make it, to find more shelves. And I did. For example, I'm super proud, and I don't think you've seen this, that a few months ago, I was able to place the book, the actual physical book, in Hong Kong's leading bookstore. It's called Bookazine.
Wow.
They are, yeah, they have a great distribution. They have, I don't know if 5 or 6 like impressive bookstores in Hong Kong. Anyone in Hong Kong would know who they are. And it did really well in just a couple of months. And now I'm about to do a book signing with them next month. Which is impressive. Like, last year I was unemployed, and now I'm talking to the leading bookstore in Hong Kong to do a book signing. And so the only roadblocks, they are mental. They're going to be in your head. Like, just put yourself out there. I was rejected by publishers. It doesn't matter. I'm actually about to publish a book on self-publishing because I was rejected. So I had to learn everything there is to learn about self-publishing on Amazon. So my message is, the roadblocks are going to be more in your head than they are actually real roadblocks.
That's great. Did you do your own editing as well? Did you kind of, I'm curious about your networking and how you kind of got the word out, marketed this book.
So so it's two things, right, that we are talking about then. So on one part is the editing, and for my books, I partner with the editors in Australia that help me with all the formal editing and all that aspect, and that is the easier part, because it's technical skills. So technical skills, if you have them, great. If you don't have them, you outsource them. The second part is the part that is much more interesting, and is the whole learning journey that I went through on how to publish a book. And most writers, they love the writing, but they hate selling themselves. And that's one thing that I had to go through. It was like, the moment you finish your book, you're not a writer anymore. You become a marketing person, and you become a salesperson. And I think doing this mind switch is really important. I would even go one step farther and say, it's not even when you finish the book. Before you even start the book, you have to have this commercial mindset. Because if you don't have an audience, especially if you are not someone who is well known, people are not going to buy from you. The reason why people buy from me is because I have an audience on LinkedIn, and I go to, so this is my second podcast this week. I have 3 podcasts and 1 LinkedIn Live this week. It's not like, oh, I was so lucky and people just started to like the book. No, like, we have to make this shift and understand that this book is now a product, and that's the way that you have to look at it. It's a product. How do you sell products? How does Apple sell products? They do amazing marketing. They do pre-launch. They are talking about the product. So you have to really change. Like, it's not a manuscript anymore. It's a product. And so with that mindset, I really started to think on, how can I amplify my voice? So I go on podcasts, I do interviews, I pitch myself to be featured on magazines. So it's really not a one-off. It's not a publish and vanish approach. I've been doing this since February, and I think every single week, more or less, I have a post, or there's a picture of me, a selfie with my book, or there is an article where I talk about something related to my book, because it's not about just the hard sell of your book. It's really trying to add value to people. So maybe I take a lesson from my book and I turn that into an article. I also, and this is something very interesting for people who want to promote their book and they don't know how, at the same time, I launch my newsletters on Substack, and I call it the same, the Lemon Tree Mindset. So my strategy was, because there are 19 lessons and I have this newsletter with the same name, every week I publish for free one of the articles. So that gave me 19 weeks, roughly 4 months. So at the end of that, quite a few people from my newsletters, they actually told me, hey, I love your lessons. I actually bought your book. And because you already build that relationship and that loyalty, they also leave a reviews, which then leads to more sales. So there's a lot that goes into the promotion. It's not just, oh, you have a great book and you put it on the shelves. It, as I said before, it's very strategic, and it's also very tactical, because it's things that you're doing every week.
It also seems to be very energy intensive. So, you better have a passion for what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to run out of steam pretty quickly. Um, and it sounds like something that has helped with your success is just saying yes to opportunities. I know from my experience that I talk to a lot of people, and before they go on an interview or before they go on a podcast, they'll just get nervous and not do it and just shy away. Um, what would you say to people to help them get over that? I know that that's a problem for a lot of people, including myself. I've always struggled with that. I have to like really force myself to, get out there.
So there was someone before we went into, I think it was a podcast. Yes, it was one of my first podcasts, and I was quite nervous. And even if today you see me here and I'm quite confident, and I really feel confident because I've done 20 or more podcasts. The first one, I was nervous and I had like all these insecurities in my head. And she said, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself. And for me, that message, I really internalized it. And I was like, actually, it's true. I'm not trying to show an image of perfection. I'm here to share my value and to share what I think can help readers and our audience today. What is that value? I think I can motivate you. I think you can find inspiration. I think I have a book that can really help you reinvent yourself the same way that I reinvented myself. And so when you do this mindset shift of it doesn't have to be perfect, every time is going to get a little bit better, that really encourages you to get over yourself, because that's what it is very often, is
Yeah,
you tell yourself all these things. Other people don't care. You're going to show up, you're going to tell a story. It's your story. 1 in 8 billion. No one can tell the story, your story, better than you can, because it is your story. And so I really encourage people to just jump on opportunities, and you never know what's going to come out of those. Like I was recently in a podcast from another connection from a medium. And before the podcast, he said, Veronica, I'm not sure that I have a direction for my podcast. I'm very new in these and you're more established. I just want to be open. Do you still want to join? And I said, sure, we're here to support each other. It's great because it's still an opportunity. And funny enough, through that episode, this host, who is an Italian guy, he has a book club. And because he liked my attitude and he liked my story, he wanted my book to be the next one for the book club. So
awesome.
now Italy
Yeah,
is my second market in Amazon after the US, which is by far the biggest market, because I have a few people in Italy who, thanks to this guy who said, I don't think I have much to offer to you. Actually, he was an amazing ambassador, and now my book is somewhere in Italy being read.
that's really awesome. Yeah, one good thing always leads to another usually, and a lot of it does depend on your attitude toward a given situation. Um, so getting back to the lemon tree and developing your writing, um, what was it about Amazon over these other distributors that obviously it's a giant market, but was it also like their platform was easier to use for beginners? How did you choose Amazon? And
Right. So that's a really good point, because when you start in this publishing world and you have no idea, I Google how to publish my book. And so I started bigger with all the options. So you have the traditional publishers where you have like the big ones, like the Penguin Random House and Hachette and all of those, which don't even accept submissions. And then you have all the traditional publishers that it's quite hard to get published there. I did send a couple of submissions and I was ghosted most of the time. Then there was a third type of publisher that was very interesting, and I want to warn the audience against them. And they're called Vanity. The the traditional the official name is hybrid publishers, but in the industry they are known as vanity publishers, or even worse, predatory publishers. And so I was contacted by two of those, which are companies that call themselves publishers, and they're going to compliment your book, and they're going to send you this flattering email about how amazing you are and all these things, and then they're going to send you a contract where you have to pay typically quite a bit of money. To give you a reference, more than 10,000 US, so that they help you publish it and they help you with the marketing and all these things. As a new writer, I was very excited because I thought, oh my God, they thought that my writing is amazing and someone is interested in me. And then I started to do my research, which is what you should do as well. And that's when I started to realize that they are predatory, because they really play on people's enthusiasm and on people's ignorance, like mine at that time, and also a bit of the ego. Like when you write a book, you want to be published, and the moment that someone tells you you have an amazing book is a confirmation bias. It's like, oh, someone is telling me what I want to hear. And so there's a psychology that goes into that, because a lot of people would be willing to pay money because you have this promise that your book is going to do amazing and all these things. My advice here is, please read the reviews. There are companies that are legitimately there to help you publish, and they will charge to guide you through the marketing journey and all the publishing and all of that. But many of them are there to take the money. And this is just a call for caution. I think it's really, really important when you go into this publishing journey that you are very careful with the partners that you go with, especially if they ask you to pay money. One of the best advices that my writing mentor gave me, and her name is Vicky Bennett. She's a bestseller author in Australia, has 32 books, so she knows what she's talking about. And she said, Veronica, never pay a publisher to publish your book. So I'm just going to repeat it. I'm not going to take ownership, but I thought it was a pretty good advice. Like, get to the point where either people want to publish you because your work is worth it, or you just self-publish, which is a very, very legitimate route as well. Well, that was a kind of long answer to start with narrow down to Amazon. So when I found myself in that situation, traditional publishers out, vanity publishers definitely out. So I'm left with self-publishing. I started to look at the different options, and I looked, for example, at Gumroad. I looked at a few different platforms, but I found Amazon quite attractive because they give you the option, besides the fact that they are a monster in terms of publishing, and when you look at their sales volume, they are comparable to the big five traditional publishers. They are international, but they are very flexible in the way that you work with them, meaning they have a portal, the Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, which allows you to publish everything in one-stop shop, really. So you can do your ebook. From the ebook, it was so easy for me to turn it into a book without really having to start a new process. They print on demand, which means that unlike stores where you have a consignment and you already give them 100 books, for example, here there's zero cost. If someone places an order, they are going to do that printing on demand. And so that makes it very, very attractive. But for me particularly, and this is where everyone is going to have a different approach and a different strategy, I had to ask myself the question, why am I publishing this book? What is my strategy? And I think that's the key thing, because everyone is going to have a different strategy. For me personally, I love writing. And so number one, I want to become a recognized author. It's really my dream. And so I have more exposure, I have more visibility. In a way, I also have more credibility if I'm in a big platform like Amazon. So that's number one. And number two, in my work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, having a published book also gives me additional credibility, additional credentials. So these two reasons combined made Amazon a very attractive platform for me. Is it the right platform for everyone? I don't think so. Let me give you a different example. A lot of creators, they might publish a digital guide, something smaller, that is not their main product. It might be a kind of a hook or a lead magnet for something bigger. Perhaps it could be a digital course. And so in that case, their goal is not to be known as an author. Their goal is to generate a funnel where you're getting a lot of people to get into your cheaper product or your entry-level product, which might be that guide, to then get their email, bring them into your funnel, and then down the road you can sell them maybe your digital course, or maybe you have a cohort for personal branding typically. And so if that's the case, a platform like Gumroad could be more interesting, because there you can get the email. Most of the products that actually all the products there I think are digital, so you don't need the printing capacity that Amazon has. And so I think when you are choosing your publishing platform, it's really, really important to ask yourself, what is your strategy? Is it being renowned as an author? Is it a lead for your other product? Is it having credibility in your industry? So there are many, many reasons. And I think that is going to inform what your platform is going to be.
Excellent. Yeah. Great points all around. And, vanity publishing, that is a very big problem in the poetry community as well, because who doesn't like to be flattered about their poetry, right? But I've had those emails too, where it's like, hey, we want to put this in a contest, or you won a contest, or so great. And then you're like, hold on, nobody's ever been that nice to me. So yeah, we should always do our research. Points. And Gumroad, I wasn't familiar with Gumroad, so that was nice to hear about them. And I think for people on platforms like Twitter who try to grow their audience and become monetized and subscription based, that sounds like a platform that would do really well for them to help funnel people into a subscription on their newsletters and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of creators, and that's what I was saying, is it's quite different from my dream of being a renowned author. For them, it's really about taking people to the next digital product and the next digital product. So I'm quite new on X, Twitter, but on LinkedIn, where I'm there for a bit over a year and I'm quite established, I see that the platform of choice is usually Gumroad, also because financially, which is also an important point to keep in mind, Gumroad only takes a 10% commission, whereas on Amazon, depending on a lot of different factors, it's a minimum royalty. It goes from 30% that they take. So that's a significant difference as well.
Yeah, especially as you grow your audience and grow your sales, that will become more and more important. Sure. And it sounds like
Yes.
you're well on your way to being both technical and renowned, or literal side,
Let's
so to
dream big,
speak.
right?
So now that we kind of discussed like the technical side to your writing, I'd like to kind of get into the philosophy. I know that you mentioned, hey, you want to start with a commercial goal in mind, so to speak, or like maybe not a commercial goal, but how you're going to sell your book. But basically, how do you choose what you're going to write about, and how do you focus your writing so that a big problem like a lot of people have, writers, is they start 50 different books at once, right? I have journals on top of journals, and they're all on chapter one. So um, kind of what is your philosophy towards that, and how do you deal with staying focused and going through your writing process? Like, what are you feeling mentally and emotionally?
Mhm. So for me, it always starts with the why, and the why for me is honestly not the commercial part. I think that's really the outcome. All my books, they have something in common, which is I want to help someone. Whether it's my first book, The Lemon Tree, which is about helping other people reinvent themselves. My second book is Conquering Your Burnout, and it's based on my story when I went through burnout in the corporate world, and what are the mindset, but also the specific things that I did to not only overcome it, but thrive out of it. And now that I'm writing also my self-publishing guide, is people who are feeling super frustrated and disappointed like I was. And it's like, hey, you have an awesome story to tell the world, and I want to help you tell it. So it starts with a why. I'm very, very clear. I think having clarity on why you're writing a book, having clarity on anything, to be honest, is really going to help you be super focused. That makes it easier because I know exactly my North Star. I know exactly where I'm going. One thing that helps for me, and this is the gender that I chose, is books that are going to help people achieve something. And so the way that I write these books is I look at my own experience. I'm a nonfiction person, perhaps because I'm not very creative to have like these big fantasy novels. So everything that I write is true. Everything that I write is based on a business proof, which is myself. And what I do in this mental process is I put myself 6 months ago when I had no idea about self-publishing, or I put myself a year ago when I was reinventing my process, and it's almost like a journal. So I really start to put myself like mentally back in time and start to share my story, but at the same time, turn it into a process so that people can not only have motivation or inspiration when they read my story, but this story can become your story because I give you a very specific framework. And so it's very methodological. I use a method, let's say, when I'm writing these books, which is I want to share my story, but I also want to turn my story into a process so that other people, so that my best friend could read this book and say, oh, great, I can implement it as well. And so when you have the vision, which is the why you're writing, when you have a methodology on how you're going to write it, it makes it much more tangible. The other thing that works for me, and I think this can work for new authors, is that a book doesn't have to be super long. Like the Lemon Tree Mindset is 12,000 words, which is very little if you think about it from a writing perspective. For context, if you write 600 words a day, which is a medium-sized article, you could have your book ready in a month. So make something, also have this mentality of breaking this big idea of this huge book into smaller pieces. Because honestly, writing 600 words a day is doable even as a side job. It doesn't even have to be your main job. But yes, mentally, it's this idea of you have a finish line. I'm a triathlete, so I always talk about sports as well. You have a finish line and you're in this long race and you have 40 kilometers, but you start to break it. Okay, where is the next water station? Where is the next break? Where is the halfway mark? And I think that really helps to mentally not get overwhelmed by the monstrosity of a book.
So would you say having those challenges like being in triathlons and things like that help you with your writing?
Yeah,
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
100%, because it's the same. You were saying before, roadblocks. The roadblocks that you face, whether it's writing or whether it's exercising, is the same. Is that little voice that we all have inside saying, "Oh, why are you doing this? This is too hard." There's all this negative self-talk, and you have to get over it. And I do find that when you exercise, you're constantly pushing your mind more than your body to say, "Okay, you can go one more step, one more step. The finish line is there." And so I transfer a lot of these mental approach and this mental strategy into my writing as well. And it's very similar.
Have you always had that approach? Like, is it something that you developed over time, or are you just like, from day one you were organized and
Yeah, I think it's always been, the way that you were raised. My mom always told me that it wasn't about being the best or the most talented, but it was really about putting in the effort. And so that's really my motto. Is like, if you don't know something, like I didn't know about self-publishing, you learn it. If you don't know how to swim, you go and take lessons. And it's that approach of, it's really the lemon tree mindset, is that life is going to throw you lemons, and instead of crying with your lemons, you take them and you take the seeds and you plant your own lemon tree. So I think in a way it's really my philosophy of life that then translates into different things when I'm writing or when I'm learning languages, which is another big thing for me. So yes, I think it's a way of training your mindset.
exactly? And how would you sometimes this idea can seem contradictory, but like there's always a need to improve, and there's also a need to be accepting. And sometimes that seems counterintuitive. How would you encourage people to deal with that? Come to terms with
So,
that?
yes, and I think you're 100% right. Like there has to be like these this synergy, right, between both, because you have to celebrate the small wins. And so for me, I'm a big believer in having like this celebration mindset. Like I remember when I joined Medium, I had 2 followers. One was my husband, and the other one was my friend Jeff, who convinced me to join Medium. And I posted on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I have 2 followers on Medium. And it was this celebratory post, because really what I was celebrating is that I took the step to start writing in another platform and to put myself out there and to have the courage to start writing when you have 2 people following you. So this mentality of celebrate your first review, celebrate your first book, celebrate your, I've always do that. If you go into my LinkedIn, I celebrated my 10 first reviews, and I said, and most of them were from my friends. It doesn't matter. So having this winner's mindset allows you to feel like a winner, because I think that's important. And also, when you're celebrating the small wins, I believe that it keeps you humble for the big wins, because you don't forget that you also celebrated your first review, so that's one thing. But the second thing is that it's not incompatible. Okay, I'm celebrating my first 10 reviews, and that's amazing. What's next? For me, instead of making it as 2 things that are contradictory, I make them work together. So you've achieved something that is amazing. What's next? In triathlon, for example, when I did my first race, which was a swim race, it was not a triathlon race, and I came last in my category, and I was so excited because I came out of the water and I made this race, I finished, and I was like, oh, I came last, but it doesn't matter because this was my first race. What's next? And this mindset is what allowed me to 2 years later complete an Ironman, which is like the hardest triathlon, the longest one, and the hardest, definitely. So it's this combination of celebrate the small wins, but use these small wins to raise the bar a little bit higher, because if you've been able to get to that level, then you definitely have it in you to raise the bar just a little bit more.
Great points. Yeah, you're right. It's not even so much milestones, it's more of just moments to be proud of yourself. Pressing
Exactly.
enter for the first time can be really like an existential thing for a lot of people. And it should be. You should take a moment to realize what each moment means to you, and um, even all the butterfly effects of that. Like, what does this mean for my family? What does this mean for my community, my coworkers, things like that? Because whether you realize it or not, what you're putting out into the world is affecting the world.
Yep.
So keeping that, and I really appreciate what you said about how you kind of separate your writing depending on the platform, because that's kind of a pitfall a lot of, myself included, have fallen into. LinkedIn doesn't like a lot of my posts, and so I've had a few warnings. So, you know, your LinkedIn you use kind of for more your technical aspects, and use Medium for your more creative side. Is that correct?
So it's not always. So the way that I use LinkedIn more is also on the format. I think the format is really, really important. As in, bad format is going to kill your post, and good format is kind of leading you in. So what is LinkedIn? LinkedIn is much more conversational. People want to get value. There's often a very professional aspect, because that's the platform that people use to find jobs, to hire people, to find investors, to sell your products. So there's a very professional element, and so I keep LinkedIn for my less, you could say less creative. It's more related to my work. So why am I posting on LinkedIn? Because I want to be known for my work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to be known as a public speaker, and so everything that I write about orbits around this topic, around my core pillar, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Does that mean that I only talk about that? No, I can talk about anything really, as long as I connect it back to the audience. Like on Saturday, for example, I did a race, and I posted a run race, and I posted it on LinkedIn, which had nothing to do with work, had nothing to do apparently with diversity, but it was a message of sports is empowering. So use your diversity, use the things that empower you. So that's for me. LinkedIn is having like my base on what I want to be known for in the professional world, and then write about it, but following the format, which is not a poem, is not long form. I tried articles on LinkedIn, does not work. Today I did a carousel. Carousel work pretty well. So that's LinkedIn. The thing that I love about Medium is that it's really where I let my writer brain and spirit go flow a little bit free. That's where I experiment. That's where I build my writing community. I write about a lot of different things. And I've written about relationships. I've written about motivation. Now I'm writing about my self-publishing guide, because the strategy that I'm using is before I publish my guide, I'm actually publishing the articles there so that I create interest around the topic. And maybe people say, hey, I actually like what she has to say about self-publishing. I'm going to get her a guide, or maybe I won't. But at least it creates awareness. I find that Medium is fantastic to build your confidence as a writer. When I started writing on Medium, I would not say I'm a writer. I would say, oh, I'm not really a writer. This is just a hobby. No, it's not really articles. Like I would have all these self-talk. And after 460 articles, which is I think what I have now, I'm very comfortable saying, actually, yes, I am a writer. You know, I've written all these articles, published a book. I changed my profile to author. So I think it's a platform where you can elevate your writing. For me, I would say that that's the reason why I write on Medium. It doesn't matter about what I write. It's about elevating myself. It's about building my confidence as an author. It's about the community that I build around writing. So that's very different.
Yeah, that's glad you kind of went that direction, because when you're first starting to learn how to write, you're Googling, how do I write this? What should I write? And a lot of people will tell you, find a niche, find a niche. You got to find a niche to build your audience. And I guess that works for a few people, but it's been my observation that for most people, um, Medium allows you to not pigeonhole yourself into just one area. You really are not just allowed, but you're actually encouraged. Hey, let's write for 20 different publications, right? If you were assigned to a publisher, they would be so mad at you, right? But as far as the Medium community goes, that seems to be a really positive aspect about it. And I think they do a really good job of allowing people to speak freely without any of the negativity. I really don't see a lot of negativity on that platform. A lot of the criticisms are very constructive and very positive. Um, do you do that as well? Do you publish with a lot of different publications? I know you started your own publication as well. Could you maybe tell a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. And I think it's very related to the topic of why you write and what we were talking about, finding new opportunities for yourself. And when I started writing in September last year, at the beginning, it's very difficult to get traction on Medium. Like the first few weeks are quite hard. And I found that myself as well. And one morning, I told my husband, I said, I know what I'm going to do, because no one is reading my articles and no one is, the publications are not accepting my articles. I'm going to create my own publication. And I had this big idea. And the thing is, if you want to make things happen, make things happen. Like, don't look for perfection. Don't put like this huge, like long timeline. So that same day I created my publication, the same day. And it's called A Smiling World. And the idea of the publication is that I wanted to open the doors for the community, for people who are new, just like myself. They are rejected by publications, and I wanted to have this welcoming space. So that's how A Smiling World was created. It's a little passion project. It's not huge, but it has over 700 followers, which is not bad for a publication. So that's pretty good. And every day I have new articles from writers. Some of them are new, but some of them are very established as well. So that's great. And for myself, I'm actually a writer in, I think it's 19 different publications. So quite a few, because as you said, I don't niche on Medium. I think in my profile, you can have lists, right? Which is kind of categories of what you write about. And I have 7, I think. I have writing and publishing. I have personal branding. I have motivation and self-improvement. I have relationships. So I have all these different topics. And so that means that I also look for different publications that can help me amplify the message. And I've written for many different publications. I've been accepted in some of the biggest ones, like Better Humans, for example, or the Writing Cooperative. I love writing for the short form. because they force you to write in 150 words, which is really challenging. And this is one thing for anyone in the audience who writes about whatever. I would encourage you to take the challenge of do these short articles where you have a limit of words, because it's much harder to explain, to have a story in 150 words than it is to just have a free flow and write whatever you want to write. So there are many different publications. One of my favorites is also Illumination, because they have great distribution, very welcoming. I always have great results when I publish there. I published this morning on their sister publication, which is called Synergy, which is more about writing. So I published one of the articles of my self-publishing guide. So yes, I'm a little bit promiscuous when it comes to publications.
It's the only way to be on Medium, really. And as far as losing my thought here. We're just speaking about Illumination. Um, Illumination is so complex, right? They have like a dozen different publications to use. Do you also explore all their? I know you said synergy, but have you looked into the other aspects of Illumination as well, or do you kind of just stick with the main two, like the synergy and the Illumination?
For now, I've been with those main two because it has worked, and also I am very mindful of my time management. If I find something that works, that has good distribution, that I'm happy with, as you said at the beginning, I do a lot of things, right? Like I'm about to publish my self-publishing guide. I have a newsletter that goes out every week. I publish daily on Twitter. I publish daily on LinkedIn. I have all these different things. So I try not to get into the rabbit hole too much and try to really like keep all my different platforms, moving at the same time. I think if I have more time to look into some of the other publications, I will. But I honestly feel pretty good about the ecosystem that I have created, where I have these different platforms that serve different purposes and add value together.
Do you make time for reading as well?
Honestly, the reading that I do is mostly on the platforms that I am. Like I think the last book that I read that was for the second time was Atomic Habits, that I reread recently, about a very famous book from James Clear about habits, the power of habits. But on a daily basis, I wish I read more. The reading that I do is peers on Medium. I read is more like social media content. That's more
Okay.
the type of reading. Yes, I'm guilty. I know that I should
You
read
read a lot
more.
of copy, right? A lot of copywriting. So do I. I mean, especially if you're networking and trying to build an audience, you really don't have a lot of time for anything else. That can be, fortunate or unfortunate depending on how you look at it. Um, and I kind of wanted to reach back to we're saying earlier about the importance of being yourself and putting yourself out there, and it does involve getting over yourself. Um, But how do you like what routes did you take to promote yourself? Like a lot of people who go, okay, I understand I need to put myself out there. How do I put myself out there? Like if, I know people find you, of course, but how do you find others to spread your message?
So I think it's less about you and more about the value that you're trying to add. And I think when you have this shift, it's easier, because if I want to talk about my experience or position myself as an expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion, it doesn't have to be about me. It can be a story about something that I learned. It can be a workshop that I made together with a client, and what was the workshop about, and what was the value that they got. It could be an article where I'm sharing my opinion about anything related to the topic, for example, quota or unconscious bias, or whatever it is. So I think many people, they're very scared of just being the center of attention and putting themselves out there, and what are people going to think, and all these different fears, when in reality, when you're trying to focus on value that you're adding to your audience, I think it's much easier, because then you are almost the messenger, right? But really what you're trying to share is the value. So today, for example, I shared a story, a carousel that I was talking about on LinkedIn, where I talk about how Apple builds high-performing teams. And that's based on my experience at Apple, but it's not really about me. It's about what I learned, how they create a culture of feedback, how they develop people, how they conduct, or how they create a culture of celebration and recognition. So I think when you try to think more holistically about value that you want to add, and value can be many things. It can be educate, it can be entertain, it can be challenge people. So it becomes easier. It's less about yourself and more about the impact that you want to have.
That's great. I just kind of had the thought, like, so it is like, if you can switch your mindset, a lot of people, they say, okay, I want to meet this person and go on this podcast. So they'll reach out and say, hi, this is my name and these are my credentials. I would like to speak with you. Obviously, okay, that's going to fall flat. So that's kind of what you're saying, is to change that messaging to, I have a story, this is the story, and I want to share it. That kind of like the approach that you're suggesting, because it does sound better.
Yes, well, to be honest, I would even go a step further, and I think as I was saying, this is maybe my podcast number 20 or something like this. At the beginning, the first two or maybe three, I'm the one who reached out to host, and I introduced myself and I share a little bit of my story. Many said no, but a few said yes. And what happens now is that when you're actually committed to creating content, to showing up online, to sharing what you do, to have clarity on your message, people actually come to you. And so my advice is actually build platforms and share content so that your value is so clear that you don't have to pitch. And that was actually a message that I wrote on X yesterday or the day before. I said, I don't like pitching, but this is what I do instead. And so do you have to go to podcasts and try to sell yourself? You can, is that the approach that works for you. The approach that works for me is really trying to create content with value across different platforms, have different touch points, partner with people. Like, for example, with you, you didn't just contact me, oh, let's do a podcast. We've been in touch, we've been supporting each other's articles. So it's not only about the value that you create, it's also about the community. And when people after a year, they see that you show up every day, they see that you're committed, they like your personality, they like your story, it's much more likely that you're going to start to have those partnerships. So it's harder than just sending a message, hey, I would like to speak in your podcast, but it's more sustainable and it's scalable, because you really start to have the ripple effect. Like maybe from today, someone's watching this episode and is like, hey, I love what Veronica like to say. I'm going to contact her, say hi, be in touch. And then maybe from there, there's an interview or there's something else.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming up on an hour. You want to stop
Oh, that
here?
was quick.
Yes, it's fun when the conversation's good. A final thought, like,
Yes.
what do you, I
Okay.
guess, what would you want people to take away from your message today?
I think is that you can have ownership. I think that's the key message. Like everything that I have done, and I wrote about it the other day. Is like, oh, last year I wasn't employed, and now I'm about to do this book signing and all these things, and people say, oh wow, how your life changed, and my life didn't change. I changed my life because I took ownership and I found opportunities for myself, and I turned rejection into opportunities. So for me, that's the message. Like you can have ownership.
I think that's fantastic. And I've never heard it put that way. Don't wait for your life to change, right? You can change your own life. You don't have to wait. I really appreciate the time. I know time is so valuable, and I really, really appreciate you coming on here and speaking.
Oh, it was fantastic. And I'm just so happy. Final message that we met randomly through writing. You are in the US, I believe. I'm in Hong Kong on the other side of the world. Through our writing and social media, we started to connect. And now we're on a podcast together trying to inspire people with our common passion. It's pretty cool.
It is. I mean, I never enjoyed the sound of my voice, and here I am a year later going on podcasts. So I appreciate your message so much. It's all about just making yourself do it and accomplishing your goals. So thank you again, and
Thank
we'll be
you.
in touch. And I can't wait to read your memoir because I'm very interested in the history of what made Veronica Veronica.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night
Have a
or
great
day.
night.
Okay.